Let's go to China. China has been the country that we all said, okay, this is where America is going to have its next gold mine is China. Is that coming true?
It is slowly coming true, and I think that's the key is when will U.S. investment, and not only U.S., but Western European investment as well, result in what the promises were by some of the business people and analysts. Basically what it comes down to is it's obvious, it's intuitive that China is a huge market. It's just because the diversity of the country, both in terms of cultures within the Chinese nation itself. There's different regions that have different dialects and languages. So without the infrastructure in place, to bring the country together to really tap into the potential market will take a long, long time.
Now, China, it really is a capitalist country. It just happens to have a communist government. Is that right? Or is it communism top to bottom?
I think...
And everybody shares everything.
As China opens up, it's more and more difficult for the communist government to run the country in a communist way. So it is becoming more capitalist, especially in the regions like Shanghai and Beijing. It's virtually the cities kind of dictate almost economic policy for themselves. So while the Chinese government is still theoretically communist, it's changing. And I think that what you'll see is changes in the government before economic benefits to the Western investments materialize.
Oh, so does that mean that I can go in and invest in a Chinese company and expect to be able to manage my returns?
Not in the same way you could invest in a U.S. company, for example. Fairly similar, but there's not the transparency there in terms of accounting standards, in terms of how they do their books, especially in state-run industries. What's interesting about China is, just like Dan said, it's state-run capitalism, and kind of runs. David Brooks had an article about this the other day in the Times. We're really hitting the state-run capitalist societies of China, and then you've got Russia and a few others like that that are becoming very successful, versus the democratic capitalist countries, which is, of course, the U.S., Japan to a lesser extent, Europe, and there's a clash into how these are, and a competition that's becoming more competitive between the two models, and it'll be interesting to see which one comes out on top.
In the short run, there's individual U.S. companies that are succeeding and having good results. GM has one of their most state-of-the-art plants located just out of Shanghai, and they actually took over the foreign auto market from the Germans. And with the most popular model right now one of the popular models is the Buick. So.
Oh, really?
Some U.S. companies like UPS and McDonald's, there's Walmart actually is having quite a bit of success. So there are U.S. companies that are benefiting quicker than.
So Walmart not only sources goods from China, but they actually have retail stores in China too.
Yeah, they're rapidly expanding their operations in the market in China.
Let's go to Japan. If I'm going to come in and ask you questions about, do I invest in Japan, it seems that we have, here in the United States, we have long held up Japan as this model, this economic model, but it's really in trouble, isn't it?
Yes. Eric will probably touch on some of the governmental reasons, but from a cultural reason, and more, I'd look at it from just the way things cycle in Asia, is that the Japanese really prospered after they established their steel industry, and really
post-World War II.
Post-World War II, and took over the steel market pretty much from the U.S. And that then fed the auto industry, which their business model was to take the auto industry and just gradually introduce this economy cars and then luxury cars eventually, taking over the U.S. market, and same with television and electronics. But now that the opportunity just to reinvent, innovate and make better existing products, their ability to innovate is the key. And in addition to the ability to come up with new technologies and products, really the age of the population, that's another key, is the average population is growing older, and it's definitely overweighted on the aging side of the population.
So they're probably not consumers. So what governmentally is Japan doing to not help themselves?
Well, what Japan, part of the main reason is their governmental system is just inefficient, and it's not working well at all. what you had is as soon as they came together and they started westernizing in the late 1800s, very successful. Then they had the Second World War, they lost that. And then pretty much at that point we said, okay, no military, no foreign policy. This was part of the U.S. occupation. And so what Japan did is they focused all their energy right on economics, and they succeeded brilliantly, like Dan stated. But the problem is the reason I said earlier they're kind of a democratic capitalism, well, they're really kind of a state-run capitalism too. They have two government agencies, Ministry of Institute of Trade and Industry and Ministry of Finance, that have run the government there for the last 40 years, just dominated things. The Diet and the Prime Minister doesn't have much power there. The real decisions are made by those two agencies. And so the bureaucracies become super powerful. And one thing that happens with strong bureaucracies is they want to keep power as well.
And so they're feeding themselves as opposed to the people,
Correct.
essentially, the people's
Yeah.
economy.
That's
We only
exactly
have 2 minutes left, and one thing I want to get to is the teamwork that you guys seem to have and do in advising clients, and how that's different in the investment advising world. And also, if we have time, to touch on the rest of Asia, the Koreas,
Sure.
And Southeast Asia.
Yeah, with Korea, it's a similar situation now as Japan was 20 years ago. They have an opportunity to really take advantage of their time to shine with their technology and products. And with what we do at the Ameriprise, we're a team-based practice. What makes us unique is that most advisors in our industry are individuals that are single perspective, and our team focus allows us to do more comprehensive work with our clients.
So do you guys have similar backgrounds?
No, very different actually, but they both mesh very well.
Well, what happens when you disagree, or do you ever disagree?
We disagree a lot.
We disagree all the time, and that's the power of being a team, is different points of view. We talk it through and come up with ideas and strategies that make sense.
Well, we're going to let that be the last word. Just want to remind everyone, if you have questions about advising, at least try. Go to AmeripriseAdvisors.com, search on Daniel X, and you can reach him. You can certainly have your choice. You can reach all sorts of different people. But the main thing is to ask a lot of questions, because there may be some answers out there so that you can make your own decisions. And we'll see you right here on Public Exposure next week. Take care.